Wait a moment. While listening to this audiobook, don't think about anyone else. Not about your friend, not about your enemy, not about your partner. Because if you truly listen carefully, you'll be exposed first. A person tells the biggest lie not to others but to themselves. We say one thing, feel something else, and live something entirely different. And the person who understands this difference doesn't just look at people, they start reading them. The great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche says, "Every person wears a mask, and what lies behind the mask scares even that person." In today's world, the person who learns to read behavior doesn't get fooled by words. This audiobook won't make you cunning. It will make you aware. Chapter 1. The mask. What you see isn't the truth. There's a man who laughs every day. His smile is always ready, like some rehearsed performance. He talks nicely to everyone, asks how they're doing, cracks jokes. People look at him and say, "What a positive person." Being around him makes it feel like there's no such thing as trouble in life. But no one sees that when this same man is alone, he can't talk to himself. As soon as silence fills the room, he becomes restless. He picks up his phone, searches for noise, tries to connect with someone. Because as soon as the noise stops, his real face starts appearing, and that face scares him. Nietzsche says a person's truest form comes out only when they're alone, when there's no one watching, when there's no one to impress, when both applause and acceptance disappear. What we are in society often isn't our truth. It's our survival character. We learn where to be where to appear strong, where to seem happy, and where to stay quiet. You think people are the way they appear, but the truth is far deeper and more uncomfortable than this. People aren't that way. People become the way they think society wants them to be. The one who appears very polite often has suppressed anger inside. Anger they never allowed to live. The one who jokes a lot is often lonely inside, because laughter becomes their shield. And the one who always appears strong fears breaking the most, so they've made weakness their enemy. This is the first psychological truth. A person tries hardest to become what they are not. Now look at your own life. Remember those moments when you too played a role. When you hid your true feelings just so people would accept you. This is the mask. And this is where the journey begins. Chapter 2. Not words, behavior speaks truth. People often say quite comfortably, "I'll never wish you harm." This sentence sounds trustworthy. It gives the mind some relief for a while. But as time passes, you see those same people bringing a slight smile to their faces at your failure. Sometimes as taunts, sometimes as jokes, and sometimes as quiet satisfaction. Why does this happen? Because words are cheap. Speaking them costs nothing. But behavior is expensive. In behavior, a person's energy, their priorities, and their truth show through. According to Nietzsche, if you want to truly understand a person, don't go by their words. Words are often chosen carefully. They contain an attempt to build an image. The real story isn't there. The real story is where a person does the same thing again and again, where they react without thinking, where certain questions make them uncomfortable and they start avoiding them, where their behavior doesn't match their spoken words. The person who starts explaining everything, who justifies every small accusation, they're actually not trying to prove themselves to the other person. They're trying to prove themselves right to themselves, because somewhere inside, they can't fully trust themselves. And the person who suddenly goes quiet isn't always weak. Sometimes they've understood that words won't change anything now. Sometimes silence is a more accurate answer than argument. Sometimes staying quiet is a way to preserve your energy. This is the second psychological truth. A person who trusts themselves doesn't need to prove themselves. They don't need to correct every misunderstanding. They don't feel it's necessary to answer every accusation. In today's world, the most dangerous person isn't. Chapter 3. Overreaction, the hidden fear inside. Have you ever noticed that some people suddenly flare up at very small things? An ordinary sentence, a light comment, and it's like a storm comes inside them. Their voice gets loud. Their words become harsh, and the atmosphere becomes heavy. Actually, in that moment, the problem isn't that statement. That statement is just a spark. The real fire is burning somewhere else. That spark touches an old wound, awakens a suppressed fear, brings forward a truth that person has been running from for years. Nietzsche says, "Where a person screams the most, that's where they're most vulnerable." Screaming often isn't strength. It's the voice of helplessness. When the inner balance has broken, the outer reaction becomes out of control. The person who falls apart at small criticism doesn't break from the criticism. They were already broken. Their self-image is so fragile that even a slight bump shakes them. So they make anger their shield so no one else can peek inside. And the person who constantly preaches morality, who draws the line between right and wrong at every opportunity, often they've crossed those boundaries themselves at some point. Their preaching isn't for others. It's for their own guilt. They're trying to calm their own mind with words. This is the third psychological truth. A person first sees in others what they themselves are running from. Who can't see the lie within themselves screams the most about others' lies. Who doesn't accept their own fear starts calling others cowards. So next time if someone overreacts to you, don't take it as your mistake. Don't feel bad. Just understand this. You've unknowingly touched their hidden fear. And when fear is touched, a person reacts not from truth but from self-protection. Chapter 4, Ego not strength but fear's armor. Listen carefully to one thing. The person who tries hardest to show themselves as superior is often the one who's most scared inside. Their fear isn't clearly visible because they've covered it with layers of ego. They repeatedly tell you who they are, what they've achieved, how big their experience is, why they're better than others. In every conversation, they place themselves at the center, as if they need to repeatedly prove that their existence is valid. But if a person is truly strong, they don't need to announce their strength. A lion doesn't need to tell anyone it's a lion. His presence is enough. Nietzsche says, ego isn't self-confidence. Ego is a weapon of self-defense. It's a shield a person puts in front of their insecurity so no one can see the weakness inside. Ego actually says, "Don't touch me. I'm already scared." When a person tries to put themselves above in every conversation, wants to prove every opinion small, turns every discussion into a battlefield of win and loss, understand they're feeling small inside. Their ego is hiding not their height but the fear of their depth. This is the fourth psychological truth. The attempt to appear superior is born from feeling inferior. Who is satisfied with themselves doesn't compare. Who is stable within themselves doesn't feel the need to belittle others. Now look at your experience. Haven't you seen people who turn every discussion into competition? Who look for victory in everything? Who take every question as a challenge? They don't want to win. They fear losing. And this fear is the real face of their ego. Chapter 5. Attention, the most dangerous addiction. In today's world, if one thing is cheapest, it's attention. People are everywhere. At every moment, someone or other is there to watch. But when this same attention becomes an addiction, it turns into the most dangerous drug. The person who always wants to be in the spotlight often can't sit alone with themselves. As soon as the applause stops, as soon as notifications go quiet, a strange restlessness begins inside them. They feel as if something is lost, as if their existence is fading. So they create noise. They speak, post, display. They share something or other every moment, so they don't hear the voice rising inside. Because the inner voice often asks questions, and running from questions is humanity's oldest habit. Nietzsche says, "The person who runs from themselves gets lost in the crowd. The crowd gives them identity, gives them a name, gives them meaning for a while. But as soon as the crowd leaves, that emptiness returns. Who posts too much, who wants validation every moment, who demands reaction to everything, they don't actually want attention. They want security. They need the assurance that they're visible, that they're not disappearing, that their existence matters to someone. This is the fifth psychological truth. The hunger for attention is a sign of emptiness inside. It points to that place where a person has stopped meeting themselves, where they've found sitting with themselves uncomfortable. This doesn't mean every visible person is weak. Being visible isn't wrong. Sharing isn't wrong. But the person who feels worthless without an audience, who is scared not of loneliness but of confronting themselves, they're broken inside. When attention is a means, it's fine. But when it becomes identity itself, a person starts living not for themselves but for the world. Chapter 6. Silence, not weakness but strength. You must have seen this scene. Some people suddenly go quiet in the middle of an argument. Words stop. Voice halts. And the other person assumes, maybe they have nothing left to say. People think, they lost. But this conclusion is often drawn hastily. Nietzsche says, who doesn't answer every word is saving their energy. Answering every arrow with an arrow isn't a sign of strength but of exhaustion. Silence is sometimes not stepping back but stepping inside. Silence also has two forms. One, silence born from fear, where a person wants to speak but fear stops them. This silence becomes a burden and keeps breaking the person inside. The second silence is born from understanding. In this silence, there's no panic. It's a pause, like someone is watching the situation, weighing it, and deciding whether speaking is necessary or not. This silence isn't reaction, it's choice. The person who blurts out at everything can't control themselves. Their words run ahead of them. They often think later, I wish I hadn't said that. But the person who knows how to stay quiet when needed controls the situation. They decide where their energy should be spent. This is the sixth psychological truth. Silence is strength when it's born not from fear but from understanding. This strength doesn't make noise but leaves an impact. It gives the other person a chance to speak, and often in that speaking, their truth comes out. So next time when someone considers your silence as weakness, smile. You're not losing. You're not running. You're not fighting. You're watching. And who learns to watch doesn't need to say everything. Chapter 7. Over-explanation, hidden restlessness. Have you ever noticed that some people start giving long explanations even for very small things? No one even asks them. Yet they start explaining why they did that, what their intention was, what they actually meant. A queue of words forms, as if they're trying to convince not the other person but themselves. According to Nietzsche, who has confidence in themselves doesn't explain themselves. They don't have the fear inside that they'll be misunderstood. They know that with time, their actions will speak for themselves. Over-explanation is a signal of inner restlessness. It's the voice of a mind that isn't calm. That person wants you not to misunderstand them because they've already deemed themselves wrong. Inside them sits an invisible judge who keeps putting them in the dock at every step. So they keep talking. They try to improve their image with words. They don't want questions to arise because if questions arise, their insecurity might come out. For them, staying quiet seems risky because in silence, their fear starts echoing. This is the seventh psychological truth. The person who justifies themselves is judging themselves inside. They have to face their own court before the world's. That's why their justification never ends. A calm person lets their actions speak. They know that not everything can be explained immediately, nor can every misunderstanding be cleared immediately. They can wait. A restless person clings to their words because they don't have full confidence in themselves yet. Chapter 8. Moral Lectures, a Method of Self-Defense. Now we stop at a very deep and uncomfortable truth. Some people always talk about morality. At every opportunity, they draw the line between right and wrong. They tell how a person should live, what should be done, and what shouldn't be done. Their words contain rules, but their tone often hides harshness. Often such people remain engaged in correcting others because they're fighting their own past. They once did something they can't accept today. And to escape that uncomfortable memory, they make morality their weapon. Nietzsche says moral preaching is often a way to hide self-blame. More than showing others the right path, it's an attempt to convince yourself, I'm right now. Behind every sermon, somewhere or other, a fear is hidden, the fear that the old truth might come forward again. When a person starts looking at you from a high moral ground, starts finding fault in everything you say, pay attention. They're not stopping you from falling down, they're stopping themselves from falling down. Their height is built from their inner insecurity. This is the eighth psychological truth. Moral superiority is often guilt's shadow. It's a shadow that doesn't stop following until a person becomes honest with themselves. This doesn't mean being moral is wrong. Morality is necessary. Conscience is necessary. But when morality starts belittling others, when it becomes not dialogue but judgment, understand this isn't a sermon. This is fear. And fear always tries to protect itself. Chapter 9. Repetition behavior is confession. Making mistakes is natural for humans. Anyone can slip once, can make a wrong decision, can fail to understand the situation properly. But when the same behavior gets repeated again and again, it doesn't remain just a mistake. It gradually becomes nature. Nietzsche says, the person who does the same thing repeatedly is revealing themselves. Whatever their words say, their repeated behavior tells their real identity. They unknowingly lay out their truth. A person repeatedly breaks promises. Every time they have a reason, a new story, someone repeatedly shows themselves as a victim, blames the world in every situation, and someone always holds someone else responsible for every problem. Sometimes circumstances, sometimes people, sometimes fate. These aren't all excuses. These are confessions. In them, it's clearly visible what kind of relationship a person has with responsibility, whether they want to change or not. This isn't understood from their words, but from their repetitions. This is the ninth psychological truth. Repeated behavior is the loudest truth. This truth doesn't scream but keeps repeating itself. And what happens again and again? Ignoring it is like lying to yourself. So don't go by words. Don't go by promises. Don't listen to talks of intentions. Look at patterns. Because a pattern is something a person can't hide for long even if they want to. Now stop for a moment. Remember a person in your life whose every story has them being right. Every time circumstances are wrong. People are wrong but not them. Understood now? They're not telling a story. They're protecting themselves. Chapter 10. Why do people hate truth-tellers? This chapter will be a bit uncomfortable because here we're talking not about others' habits but all of ours. A person wants to live comfortably in their created illusion. They stay connected to those stories that make them feel right, innocent, and safe. Nietzsche says, people don't get angry at lies. People get angry at truth. Lies give them comfort because lies support their imagination. But truth shakes those walls on which their self-narrative stands. When a person removes their mask in front of you, they don't remain a teacher. They become a threat, because they expose what they were hiding and living with. And a person gets angry at who breaks their illusion, not at who deceives them. That's why honest people often remain alone. They don't fit everywhere. They're not welcomed in every gathering. Because their presence raises questions, and not everyone likes questions. This is the 10th psychological truth. People don't hate you because you're wrong, but because you show them a mirror. You don't. Chapter 11. Projection. Throwing your darkness onto others. A very simple question, but its answer isn't easy. When a person repeatedly levels the same accusation at you, is that accusation really about you? Or is that accusation pointing towards some other story? Nietzsche says, A person feels lighter by seeing their faults in others. It's a strange relief. As long as the fault appears outside, the burden inside reduces for a while. Projection is the mind's most clever defense system. Protects us from ourselves. A person can't accept something about themselves that could break their image. So they stick it onto others. They say, the problem is you, so they don't have to say, the problem is in me. The person who repeatedly says people are very selfish is often ready to do anything for their own benefit. Who calls everyone a liar often fears truth the most. Because when truth comes out, their built-up image might break. In projection, accusations don't come suddenly. They come repeatedly. The same word, the same complaint, the same story. As if a person is trying not to make you understand but themselves. They want someone else to take on the darkness inside them. This is the 11th psychological truth. Accusations made repeatedly without proof aren't statements. They're confessions. They're signals of what a person is refusing to accept about themselves. So next time if someone attacks you without reason, don't react immediately. Stop. Don't fight. Listen. Try to feel the restlessness hidden behind their words. Often they're not saying anything about you at all. They're talking about the fear inside them, their faults, and their insecurity. The only difference is that their voice is turned toward you. Chapter 12. Why does others' success burn? You must have seen this scene. You reach some achievement and some people congratulate you. The words are right. There's sweetness in the voice too. But in the eyes, there isn't that happiness that comes from the heart. The smile is incomplete and the congratulation feels formal. Nietzsche says, a person doesn't burn from others' achievement but from their own failure. Jealousy isn't born from seeing someone else's height but from feeling one's own lowness inside. When the other person moves forward, they place our own stop steps in front of us. That's why some people start proving your progress as small. They make your struggle seem light. They say, what's the big deal in this? You just got opportunities. Luck must have supported you. These sentences aren't about your success. They're the voice of their incomplete desires inside. You've awakened a dream in their mind that they never fulfilled. Your flight reminds them that they could have flown too. But they didn't try or got scared or stopped midway. This is the 12th psychological truth. The person who calls your flight small is afraid of flying themselves. They're not putting you down. They're trying to calm their own fear. If they accept your success, they'll have to face their failure. So don't consider every smile as support. Not every congratulation is genuine. Some people, seeing you move forward, just check whether their pain is still hidden or not. Chapter 13, Power Dynamics. Who's up? Who's down? Every conversation isn't just an exchange of words. Beneath the conversation, at an invisible level, there's always an exchange of power happening. It's being decided who's leading and who's adapting. Nietzsche says, where two people meet, a balance of power forms. This balance is decided less by spoken words and more by unspoken signals. Who interrupts, who speaks without hesitation, who makes eye contact and who averts their gaze. All these seem like small things, but these decide which direction the conversation will go. Sometimes someone gives orders and the other person starts justifying. Sometimes someone presents their point and the other dismisses it lightly. In these moments, power slowly shifts to one side, often without any noise, without any argument. The person who doesn't let others speak actually fears listening. They feel that if they give the other person space, their own grip will loosen. So they create a siege with words so control remains. And the person who laughs at everything, who turns every uncomfortable moment into a joke. Often they're avoiding confrontation. Laughter becomes their shield behind which they hide their fear. This is the 13th psychological truth. Dominance shows not through noise but through presence. True power doesn't demand a loud voice. It's felt through presence. Who has confidence in their place doesn't need to prove it. Chapter 14. The Game of Dominance and Submission. Some people are such that wherever they go, the atmosphere of the room changes. They neither speak loudly nor try to put themselves forward. Yet people's eyes automatically turn toward them. In their presence, there's a stillness, a stability that impacts more than words. Why does this happen? Because they don't seek approval. They don't try to prove who they are. Their self-worth isn't based on others' reactions. Nietzsche says, "Who doesn't prove themselves is the most impressive." Such a person doesn't need to make their place because they've already settled within themselves. Submission isn't born from bowing your head. It's born from self-doubt. When a person loses trust in themselves, they unknowingly hand over their power to others. They start asking in everything, "I'm okay, right? I said the right thing, right?" And every time they ask this question, they bend a little more. This is the 14th psychological truth. Power goes where validation is sought. When you want confirmation of your value from others, you give them the right to decide whether you're up or down. This doesn't mean you should become arrogant. Dominance doesn't mean suppressing others. It means being stable within yourself. When you settle within yourself, you have neither the hurry to rise up nor the fear of falling down. Chapter 15. Crowd Psychology. Why does lone truth scare? You must have experienced this. What seems completely right when alone, what you're confident about, that very thing starts wavering when you reach the crowd. Suddenly you start feeling that maybe you're the one who's wrong. Because there are many voices in front, and a lone voice often starts doubting itself. Nietzsche says, "A crowd never seeks truth. It only seeks comfort. Truth is uncomfortable. It asks questions. It breaks habits and demands responsibility. Whereas the crowd needs just this much. Everything continues as before. No change, no risk, no threat. That's why the person who thinks differently from the crowd, who raises questions, they're called crazy. Because their existence challenges the crowd's comfort. This is the 15th psychological truth. Truth is alone. It doesn't need support. A lie needs a crowd because a lie can't stand alone. It needs validation, applause, repetition. If you can stand alone, if you don't base your thinking on the crowd's approval, understand you're becoming mentally free. This freedom isn't easy, but this is the place where a person actually starts becoming themselves. Chapter 16. Why do people attack when they lose? When a person loses to you in argument, they often don't end the debate. They change direction. They start attacking not your point but you. Suddenly the issue isn't your thinking anymore. It becomes your identity. They'll say, "You're just like this. This is your level." These sentences aren't arguments. They're attempts to wound. Because when the battle of ideas is lost to save ego, a person descends to personal attacks. Nietzsche says, "When argument ends, attack begins." In this moment, the fight isn't between truth and lie anymore. It becomes a fight of ego. And ego, before admitting defeat, tries to show the other person as inferior. This attack isn't to win. It's to protect oneself. To show the other person, "I haven't lost. I'm just changing the argument." But this change makes their defeat even clearer. This is the 16th psychological truth. Personal attacks are a sign of intellectual defeat. Where argument weakens, words become poison. And who spews poison is trying to protect themselves. If a person starts putting you down, starts attacking your worth, don't take it personally. Understand you've reached that level where they have no other way left. Now look at your life struggles. Where did people attack you instead of understanding you? Understood now why? Because in that moment you were standing above, not in argument but in situation. Chapter 17. Why do people become what they hate? A strange but deep truth. The person who hates something the most starts unknowingly living around that very thing. Their thinking, their reactions, their struggle all start revolving in that direction. And gradually they become what they wanted to run from. Nietzsche says, "You become like what you fight with," because while constantly opposing, we keep our attention fixed on that very thing. And where attention goes, our energy also starts going. Fighting doesn't change us, it starts shaping us. You must have seen, some people, while fighting corruption, become corrupt themselves. Some people, while opposing ego, become egoistic themselves. Initially, their intention is right, but with time, opposition itself becomes their identity. And once it becomes identity, they start repeating the same pattern they wanted to break. This is the 17th psychological truth. Struggle without consciousness doesn't create transformation. It only creates repetition. It brings back an old structure with a new face. The external enemy changes, but the internal structure remains the same. So blind fighting isn't necessary. Rage-filled opposition doesn't give true solution. What's necessary is awareness, the understanding of who you're fighting and why. Because until you recognize within yourself that same tendency you're fighting outside, you can't be free from it. True change begins not from opposition but from understanding. Chapter 18. Final truth. Reading yourself is hardest. Now the last thing. Reading others is relatively easy. Their words, their behavior, their reactions, all are visible outside. But reading yourself is the hardest task. Because here there's no curtain. No excuse works. Nietzsche says, "A person tells the biggest lie to themselves about themselves. This lie isn't to deceive others. It's to handle oneself." We don't run from truth because it's harsh, but because it demands responsibility. We give our fear a beautiful name, caution. We start justifying our ego by calling it self-respect. We call our escape busy life, so we don't have to accept that we're avoiding meeting ourselves. This is the 18th and final psychological truth. Until you look at yourself honestly, until you clearly recognize your excuses, you can't truly understand anyone. Because the ability to understand others comes from inner clarity. If you've listened carefully till here, you're no longer the same person you were at the beginning. Now you're hearing not people's words but their minds. And this was the purpose of this entire journey, to bring you closer to yourself more than to others. If this audiobook stopped you somewhere, forced you to think somewhere, or gave you courage to see yourself, please like this video because your one click helps in reaching such deep content to more people. If you want such mind-opening audiobooks and psychological insights, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And yes, definitely write in the comments which chapter of this audiobook touched your heart the most.